Good evening, everyone. Tonight is the Town Council regular meeting, Wednesday, May 18th, 2022 at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Rose Room. We will all now stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up is visitors. Do we have any visitors that would like to be recognized?
Am I on the agenda?
You are, my man.
I don't want to be recognized.
Anybody else would like to be recognized as a visitor? He's on the agenda as well. All right, hearing none, then we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. May 4th, 2022 minutes. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. Item number 3, appointments, reappointments. Is this an appointment or a reappointment?
Reappointment.
Reappointment. Okay, so Martin Jaffe for the Harbor Management Commission, a reappointment until 6/30/2026. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make that.
A second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. We will now move on to item number 5, which is the Morgan Scholarship Awards. So these are the two students at the Morgan School received scholarships from the town council. This has been done in the past. Tonight we have Jason Domkowski. Sorry, apologize. So Jason's here. If you'd like to come over here and just say a couple words.
Thank you for this award. I'm honored for it, and that's all I have to say.
That's great. Very well. So on behalf of the town council, I have a check here for you, but on behalf of the town council also, we obviously want to congratulate you on you're going to be graduating shortly and all the accomplishments you've had so far at the Morgan School, and we wish you the best of luck moving forward and going to college. Okay? Granddad, okay. Thank you. You're welcome. Congratulations. All right, item number 6.
Are there two?
Huh? She's coming. She's coming next meeting. All right, so item number 6 is to ratify the town council goals, which we worked on at our workshop the last time. So at this point, everybody has a copy of those? Right?
Yeah.
All right. So these are the ones that we discussed the last time. Does anybody have any questions on these at this point? And if there is none, then we will look forward for a motion to ratify the town council goals.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. Motion carries. We will now move on to the capping of the landfill, and Carl will give us a update on this.
So, I've alluded to it in prior reports, the opportunity to cap the town's landfill with an approach that's different than what we've assumed up until this point. We issued an RFP for engineering services to help identify an approach to how we would do capping the landfill. We received 3 proposals. One proposal did not bother to give a price, so kind of moved beyond that one. So that left us with two approaches. So one firm's approach was more in line with the assumptions that have gone into the thought process thus far, where there's a significant engineering expense that's paid up front, and then an additional cost to cap the landfill. Prior estimates had cost of capping landfill around $6 million. The second vendor comes from an engineering firm that also has its own in-house construction division. Their proposal would be evaluate and try and model the underground component of what a landfill looks like. If it's as stable as they think it is, then the next step would be importing soil to cap the landfill. Their independent construction or in-house construction division will be providing some of that soil. There's a soil market, so they would be taking soil off of people's hands. So the revenue of soil and their cost avoidance on soil disposal has a monetary value. And that monetary value then offsets the construction work that would have to be done. So the town's expense is initial borings of the site to model what the fill looks like and make sure that the site works under this construction approach. That would be a town expense of $45,000. We have monies already set aside in a dedicated reserve for capping the landfill. Assuming everything pans out after that investment, the next step would be working to get DEP approval to cap the landfill, approval on the soils to be coming into the site, and then working with the town to figure out a schedule of frequency of trucks and things of that nature so that they could cap off the landfill at what basically becomes no construction cost to the town. So it's an entirely different model, an entirely different approach. This company is currently in the regulatory phase with Plainville, and they're gearing up to do a similar project in West Hartford, both capping landfills, both with the same approach. And DEEP has given them approvals in the past with this methodology for a few other towns, and they think the Clinton site is also good for this type of approach. So that opens the door to a beneficial reuse of the site. Beneficial reuse, there's been strong interest in the solar development market for putting arrays on that property, making it a solar farm. So that could generate revenue for the town, as well as burnish our green credentials. And you could have a revenue stream coming off of what currently is idle property that the town kind of hasn't had the ability to do much of anything with because it hasn't capped the site. So we've had the proposal. I've gone over the proposal. I've spoken to West Hartford. I've spoken to Plainville to get more positive feedback. The town engineer reviewed it. The town engineer is comfortable with the approach. He followed up with a few others on references. They all come back strong, and that this is what looks like a real option for the town to address a long-standing property that needs to be addressed and do it in a way that is incredibly cost efficient to us. So if the council's on board, I would be executing an agreement, and then I think we've already appropriated money, but if the council gives me your blessing to spend money out of that fund, that puts us in a position where we can expend the dollars to model what the underground component of what the landfill looks like and go forward. The company has done this on a number of other landfills. They've never not gone forward with it. Worst case scenario, a development in Massachusetts they looked at. There was a part of the landfill that didn't seem to work and make sense, so they just sort of avoided it. They filled whatever they didn't avoid, and so they still went forward with the project. They just modified the scope. It's anticipated that they're not going to have that issue in Clinton, and we would look more like the projects that they've got going in West Hartford and Plainville.
So that company wouldn't be involved with the solar afterwards?
They would just
do the
be capping the landfill.
Just in
We would have to
preparation.
give an indication to DEEP on what the anticipated beneficial reuse would be so that they understand from a permitting standpoint. We would be looking at this, that, and the other thing, and they would, that would weigh into their factors. Plainville is looking at doing something entirely different, so they've engaged the company to do the capping of the landfill, and then they'll go out for an RFP for beneficial reuse. West Hartford bid it as all-in-one because they want to take their landfill and turn it into a transfer station. So we already have a transfer station, so that's not quite an apples to apples. Plainville's more of an analog to what we're doing.
So the worst thing that could happen is that they bore down and it's not a fit and we could be out 45,000.
Correct. But they don't believe that it's gonna come back negative. They believe it'll come back affirmative. And we did study this property once before in,
2009.
there was
Okay.
another study that was done, I think in 2014, that, did some initial assessments. That was provided to all the bidders so that they were aware of that as a report. And that report continues to affirm that this approach will work well for the Clinton landfill.
So $45,000.
Can't hear you, I'm sorry. I got the fan behind me.
Sorry,
Speak
just said
up.
$45,000.
So do you need a motion or approval, a motion to approve you're going forward with this bidder?
I
To
don't,
engage you.
I don't believe I need to award the bid. I don't believe I need the motion. An appropriation was already made to reserve monies for the landfill.
Right.
I would just be looking for some council concurrence that you want to go to the next step, and then you would authorize taking 45,000 out of the 350 that we have reserved for landfill capping in order to
Good.
make that happen.
Is the next step deep or is that step been taken?
Deep is after they do the borings and
Oh,
modeling
after
of
they
the
do it.
site.
Okay.
So Deep would be approving the approach, Deep would be approving the material types that could go on the site and what they look like, and the ultimate approach. So Deep will be the one that is the final regulator and saying how it goes together, so. But
And they have a good working relationship with Deep.
they say they do. Reference checks come back to suggest that there is a good working relationship with Deep and that they have a successful track record with a number of other municipalities.
That can really hold stuff up, so that would be
Right.
terrific.
And then they would just need some sort of direction from the town as far as what we're thinking of doing with the property?
Yeah, as part of the report that goes to Deep, it would
Okay.
be telegraphing what those beneficial reuses of the site could be, how we intended to use the site, and that's about the extent of it. There is no commitment with this company beyond
Right.
just the
Capping.
capping.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to
Council
make a
members, anybody?
motion to-
Good?
What? I'm sorry, what?
No, yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize Carl to go ahead with discussions with this firm and to authorize him to
Well, that's gonna come.
use $45,000 of the landfill capping dedicated fund for the purpose of borings at the old dump site on Old Nod Road. Mary, you can make something out of that one, right?
That's a good one. Well, that's short.
Whatever she said.
Do we have a second on what Carol said?
Yeah,
I'll second that.
Any other further discussion?
that's
Okay.
good news.
All in favor?
Can I would
Yeah.
like to say, this never would have happened without a town manager. I've seen that old dump site kicked around since 2009, and it was such a massive undertaking with so many legalities attached that it's just been kicked down the road. This never would have happened without you and your knowledge, Carl, and your aptitude, and I want to thank you for getting this rolling.
It's very good news.
Yeah, excellent.
Anyone else?
You're the
It is
man.
definitely great news. I will say that previous First Selectman Willie Fritz did do a tremendous amount of work towards it. Unfortunately, the market wasn't receptive, so
Well,
it
what does
also
the
takes...
market have to do with the town's responsibility to cap the landfill?
It's the partnerships that Carl has been able to engage with. It has to do a lot with the market.
Okay.
But it's wonderful moving forward, and I hope Deep is receptive to working with the town and getting that decision in terms of the future use. Are we going to have conversations about future use at this time, or are we going to leave it until that process goes forward?
I wasn't envisioning that discussion tonight, just sort of getting the ball rolling to make sure that the model works, and then we can get into DEEP's permitting process. So there is a calendar, and I guess with work from home, there's a backlog. So getting through DEEP is sort of the biggest milestone.
Anyone else? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. Abstain? Like Bobby Brady. Bobby Brady. All right, let's move on to item number 8, charter revision calendar. So we've had this discussion about forming another charter revision committee. So Carl has provided us with a charter revision calendar of dates that we would need to fall into, as well as the charter revision process.
So you've got 2 sheets of paper. The charter revision process is something that I gave you previously, which is sort of crib notes of what the statute reads for process and certain time frames by 15 days, 30 days, so on and so forth. And then tried to put that into a calendar, backing into what the council statement was to put the question on the November 2023 ballot. So the end date is specific. The date to submit ballot questions to the town clerk is specific. And then I backed into the absolute last date for the council to approve the ballot questions. So then everything else is rough guesstimates. I was making an assumption of the council would approve the charter the charge for the Charter Revision Commission, appoint the members, and set the length of time for them to work in July. Obviously, if you accelerate that into a June decision, you have the ability to tack on some more time for flex, or to give the study committee more time to review. In order to reach that November 2023 milestone, I gave them 5 months to complete their review work, since it's not a whole cloth revision of the charter. It's fixing the bugs, which I think was Christine's term for it. So after they get appointed, I assumed a certain degree of time in July they would have to meet. They have to get sworn in. They have to set a meeting calendar. The first thing that they've got to do is hold a public hearing before they start any substantive work. So I targeted that for the beginning of August. Then the balance of the calendar year is basically going over possible charter amendments that are in the charge given by the council, and whatever other areas they want to get into. January, they start to get into the process of laying out what the report starts to look like. They have to have a hearing on the draft report. It has to get filed with the town clerk. There's a back and forth process with the council. If the council has no recommendations, the report becomes final. If the council does have recommendations, there's another 30 days. So this assumes kind of worst case scenario that maybe there's a back and forth required between the council and the commission. So that's why you don't get till April 1st until the report becomes final. Then the council has to act to approve or reject the proposed amendments that come out of the final report. Those things have to be printed in a paper of circulation in town. So depending on how much charter revision you're doing, the ad could be of some size and length. And then the council has to make a decision as to where voters, which election it will take place. So again, I assume that November 2023 date. And then the balance of June, July becomes making sure that the questions are crafted properly, and the town attorney blesses that. August 16th is the absolute last date to act on approving those ballot questions so that they can go off to town clerk for inclusion on the ballot in September. And then you're off till November. So the question is, when do you want to create the charge for the committee, and when will you be ready to appoint people? And then you have to give them a length of time to study the issues. So this mock-up assumes 5 months with the July council, with the council making a decision in July. So you move to June, you still got to figure out the time. But that's easy enough to write once you guys say where you want to go.
Now, I have a question on engagement with the town attorney. The last charter revision granted, that was substantial. The town attorney did engage with them quite a bit and support them, just knowledge-based. Most of the folks weren't really well-versed. Do you anticipate the need for their engagement, and will the town attorney have the time to do so within the schedule as well?
Town attorney has the ability to do it. We have a large firm now representing us instead of one individual, so there's some flex there where they have the ability to respond. Suggested that I would be staffing the committee to help guide them. I've been through a couple of charter revisions already, so I have that experience of prepping language and working through with the town attorney to get stuff done. So I don't envision that there would be a time crunch, given the fact that we're dealing with a major law firm. They've got extensive experience, and we're not dealing with one individual. It's really just how much time and effort the individual committee is going to do wordsmithing. When I've done other charter revision commissions, it's sort of get them to agree on concepts, and while they're moving on to the next concept, you're backfilling by writing and prepping things, so that once the workflow is done discussing concepts and agreeing where they want to go, the language is somewhat there. And I don't think a lot of wordsmithing is needed based on some of the things the council's flagged already, so it shouldn't be a heavy lift to write the revisions.
And is there a reason not to use a lot of the members from the last charter revision? Is that not done? I mean, they're familiar with it,
That's up to you guys.
Yeah, that's,
but is there
I
a
mean,
reason not to?
no, there wouldn't be a reason not to. I mean, we would open it up for charter members for them to put their names forth as, yeah. So I mean, we do it like we do with anything. So we open it up and
Okay.
people would like to submit their names as possible, members of the charter revision committee.
Okay.
So, I mean, so again, at this point, we're looking for, if we're good with these dates, then we can move forward with the charge.
Yeah, I would prep the charge and have that ready. I just need to know what meeting date you want that to align with. Do you want to have it in June, or do you want to, try and have that for a July 6th meeting, which is your morning meeting?
Right.
In which case, you got to have your candidates ready to be nominated that day.
So doing a July meeting would probably just give us more time to search for candidates for the commission. That would be my feeling. Okay, so we'll move forward then with July.
Carl, just a question. I look at the charter revision process. Look at number 10. What happens if we don't get 15%? Does it go away, or do we reapply, or resubmit?
Fails.
What do we do?
It fails,
It fails,
and you'd have to do it again.
we start over?
Correct. So I think that's kind of the important factor is when you're picking that election. So you don't want to line it up to go with a special election either on its own, unless there's a groundswell and you're going to get there. And as we saw, even if you try and lump it in with the budget meeting, that turnout can be dicey as to whether
I'll
you're
say our
going.
turnout for the budget wasn't that good.
Prior years, more recent history suggests it's tight, and you don't get to that 15% threshold till late in the day. So that could be a risk, which I think is why Dennis was suggesting line it up with the municipal election, when normally you get a higher voter turnout,
Gotcha.
and you get the 15%.
I don't know if you recall the first charter when we were changing the town manager and changing, well, we weren't changing essentially the charter with the council yet, but remember that one failed, and then we reconstituted it and started over from scratch to get to the town manager.
So July
No.
6th.
So July,
We
yep.
should
Yeah,
have
you go
the
through this
names
whole
by then.
process and then for nothing.
That was, yeah.
Right.
It's bad.
So at that meeting, yes, we would want the names of the individuals that would be putting their names forth for the committee.
So will we talk about that before at another meeting? Because then we're just gonna,
We have to have that on an agenda item prior to
Okay,
this
great,
July meeting
great.
in order to set the names. So
Okay.
that at a July meeting, it would be finalized.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay, so we're good with that?
Yep.
All right. Excellent.
I have a question on the volunteer fire department headquarters documents. It's not on the agenda. Are we adding it to the agenda?
That was a workshop that we had at 6 o'clock tonight.
Oh, okay.
Okay, item number 9 is to set our mill rate for fiscal year 2022 to 2023. So at this point, I will look for a motion that the town council hereby sets the rate of taxation on the taxable property of the town for the July 1st, 2022 through June 30, 2023 fiscal year at 29.83. A second?
Second?
Okay. Any discussion?
May I ask what the mill rate was last year?
The same, 29.83.
29.83.
Just asking.
And you put that
Anybody else? All in favor?
there. Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. Item number 10, wayfinding signage. Mr. Allen. So just a little overview. So we've had, they came before the council before, there was some signage with names on it, that the EDC at that point was saying that this is the way it would like to go. They've had, the EDC has come up with another decision to have a different mock-up, which we all have now, of the signs that we will be, or that they're going to be talking about tonight.
So just because this is a saga, and apologies for coming back, something you decided on your meeting on 12/1/21.
We're done talking about
It was light for light is the way we wanted to have the signs done. So that, these go back to Dan Reese, these signs out here. And as the EDC started getting involved in this thing and talking with Dick Pryor, started realizing is, one, having the same businesses on there, when these were originated, they were paid for by the businesses. Now they're paid for by town money. And the question was, we were going to ask the EDC is how we're going to decide if we're all going to be the same names, how did that happen? And if somebody else wants to be on, how come they're not? And then it went to replacement theory. It was, if somebody wanted to get on, then how are we going to decide who to take off, put that person on? And then it got into who's on the top, because if you look at these things on the bottom, you can't read them. So it got to be this kind of like, we couldn't have any answer except for going to be grandfathered. And that wouldn't work with some of the businesses I know in town, especially some of the guys on Main Street. So then we kind of revisited the thing in our meeting on March 8th. And we said, look, the whole purpose of these wayfinding signs in the first place was to direct people to different areas in the town, whether it's Grove Street, Commerce Street, or the exit 63 stand signs we have. It was also to brand the town. And right now, we've got two relatively similar-looking signs, but they're a crazy quilt because they've been up there before Custer, according to Dick Pryor, they've been up there. They were different. Everybody made their own sign. Those signs were made them for people, so they were all kind of this motley kind of thing. So it was like, how do we, one, make new signs that look clean, have them all have the same font, the same color, the same, no logos, look the same. Try to get a little professional here. And then the real purpose was, were people driving through town as they're driving or walking, but mostly driving, where do we find the attractions? Where are the marinas? Where are the restaurants? Where's the parking? Which is another discussion in its own right. And so at our meeting of March 8th, much to some people's consternation, we kind of like changed course, and we recommended unanimously EDC that we went with the more generic areas of the town. As new businesses come on, they're included with the marina. We've also got north of 95 up here, we're going to have restaurants and things adding in, so it's going to be happening. So if you look at the kind of exhibits they have, I mean, one is, oversell, but you know what the signs look like. So the first page just takes on the left, and they're all the same. This is like heading east for these things. These are mock-ups. This is what the current line, what the current signs would look like with the same names on it. Now, you gotta remember, according to Dick, all these names, like the dentist name, would be no more than 3 inches high. So you're starting to get, almost, if you're going by at 30, it doesn't happen. The one on the right, and these were the same names that the EDC decided, it's not set in stone, but it was the harbor, marina district, restaurants, town docks, and parking, which this would be, parking would be behind the Chicken Pizza and those places, that was the parking. There was a question raised by somebody, we do have parking down by the town pier. It's a long way away from Commerce Street or Grove Street, and I was against it, but I said we should bring it up, because when you're coming to Grove Street, you can take a right and end up down by parking hole.
You're talking about Commerce Street, though. Commerce Street.
Commerce Street or Grove. Grove is.
Let's just stick with one.
Okay, so this is parking, right? So this, you got your A and your B, make the points. On Grove Street, it's exactly the same sign. On the left is the current the extant business is on there. On the right, it's the same districts. It's just you're on Grove Street looking at it. This is reversed because, but I was gonna have Dick change the arrows just because you realize this would be coming, if you're coming from heading west, not east. But the arrows would face to the right place in town. That's what that looks like. They're larger, they're cleaner. You don't have to worry about anybody off because basically we're not advertising an individual business with town money. We're just advertising, we're just telling people where to go. Literally, where to go. On the last one, which was the exit 63 sign, which also was the same, and on the left you see that we had it to be little businesses on there, which was fine, they look good. But if you made it more generic, instead of having Clinton Crossing, which we have Indian River coming on, so you got to put them on. And what about Ethan Allen? And what about the, I mean, I don't know, anyway. Same process. So this would be all the generic ones on the left. The food arrow, which now we're heading you down to McDonald's or the Subway, eventually would be both ways. You're going to have restaurants in Indian River, so we could add arrows very easily to these things. And the last exhibit is just when we were talking at the EDC, you know, if you're getting off at exit, the northbound exit 63, you're sitting on the high street, everything's pretty much to the left except for McDonald's to the right. The real pivot here is when you end up sitting on Route 81, and now you've got a lot of stuff north now. You've got a couple shopping malls, you're going to have the library, you've got Morgan, you've got the athletic field, and the right you've got the town center, you've got the marinas, you've got the, you know, the lot, whatever. So that doesn't, this last sign doesn't exist, but to take advantage of you folks being here, it's something we ought to talk about, because that's really what the decision is made is when you're sitting at that light on 81. Not to mention, we've got a southbound exit now in front of Indian River too. So these two areas, which don't have to be determined tonight, are very important if the purpose of this is when people are sitting there, where do I get to town? And very importantly for our town, how do you get downtown? I mean, there's a lot of signs up there. Again, people, you can't miss Clinton Crossing. You're not going to be able to miss Indian River. But how do you realize there's something south of 95? And that's what this is all about. So the request is that with apologies that the council change their mind, make a motion, and then say, let's go with, we can modify it, but we go with the generic areas and kind of like free us up from not dealing with spending town money on individual businesses.
And this is coming as you guys unanimously decided?
It was unanimous, and that, you know, and to be honest with you, I didn't know from the 12-1 meeting that it was decided like that. In my head, I was ill-disposed at the time, and at the meeting, I thought we were talking about exactly the same materials because of the state. It had to be the same material, it had to be the same height, it had to be the same dimensions. So, kind of moved ahead. When we did find out this, we got into how are we going to decide this, and we could have come up with an answer that was going to be equitable.
So can we take these one at a time and come to a conclusion as to a particular sign?
Can you take what?
Can we take these one at a time
Yeah.
and make a decision?
Yeah, well, I think it's got all to be like the same. So I mean, if we're gonna go with their current recommendation.
Well, let's do one at a time.
Okay.
I'm looking at the one where it says Commerce Street on the
Yep.
top here. And to me, the one on the right is a no-brainer, but I would just remove that parking one at the bottom, because I think that would create more confusion than clarity.
You did vote on 12-1 to have parking on the
We're
sign.
not talking about
You voted to add-
12-1 anymore.
Yeah,
We're talking
I
about
like your
tonight.
attitude.
We're talking
You want to
about
take it up? You
tonight.
can do anything you want. Just tell me what
Harbor,
to do.
Marina District, restaurants, town docks.
Make a
Clean,
motion.
simple, when you're driving by at 25 miles an hour, because that's the law, you can read it. And there may be
Just the
people
law.
who, that's the
Talk
law.
to them, don't talk to me. You put it on, take
And
it off.
to me, that just makes so much sense. Clean, clear, nobody's gonna be offended that they're not on there. And honestly, the names that are on there, like the dry cleaners, no offense, Pat, but really? Aragoni Design does not exist anymore.
Dentist.
So, anyway.
I agree with you, Carol, but I don't understand why parking is confusing.
Because these people, anybody who's following this sign is gonna think, oh, I can park here and get to there. But the parking, if they get parked behind Shore TV and think that they're gonna walk to the harbor,
If there's a way
they
that
got a
you could say
long,
town,
long
it's
way.
long, and I've checked with
Just
Dick.
leave it
If it
long.
could say town center parking,
You could do it smaller across the top.
See, here you go, opening up the can of worms.
I
It's
hate
gonna
to
be-
all I know is that everybody wanted to have parking on here but you.
Everybody
So-
has been screaming for signs directing people to
Well,
parking
I can see putting
forever.
other
I'm past
signs, but I
arguing now.
think this is
Take
confusing.
it to a vote, let's get it out.
That would be full
I mean,
of-
the other issue with the parking is that technically is not town parking.
That's
The problem is that that's not town parking.
Right, it's not
Behind
town
Granite
parking.
Beach and Shore, that isn't town
Why
parking.
don't you make a motion, we get parking out here so we move on?
I'm just saying, I mean,
I like parking there, and I think this is one
But it's
parking
not
there.
town parking.
It is town parking, there are.
Well, if you
Well,
go
If you don't own that
far
property, so it's not town parking,
you're
it's
in
not town
conflicting
parking.
Stories.
I understand, but then you would have to direct
So-
someone specifically where to park, and then we would have to then put
All right.
signs up so specifically, because if we're putting this on a town sign and the town's directing us to parking, that's not all town property.
There's also parking on the street, you know,
Yeah.
there's parking at the town
But
hall.
that is
there's-
defeating the purpose of sending people to this specific area.
I
Getting
just-
bogged down in downtown parking where we can and where we can't is how we wound up with no answer, no conclusive decision in December. So,
There was a conclusive decision in December. The EDC has changed its mind.
But we do like the way they changed it.
but we do like the way they changed it.
Why don't you get rid of parking and let's move on so we can get to start cutting wood?
I would like to make
Okay.
a motion that the EDC, I don't know if you need a motion, probably don't need a motion. Is there a consensus of opinion?
Are you talking about all the signs
No,
or just
I'm
one?
just talking about Commerce Street.
Okay.
There's none on
My,
Grove Street.
my opinion is this sign minus the word parking at the bottom. If anybody's noticed, there is a
It's-
parking
it's-
sign
tell me yes or
on
no.
the
Okay.
side of the boat club building. There's a sign there that says parking. It's attached directly to the building, and it will send people back there. That sign
But everybody
already.
else says they don't know where parking is. That's all
Christine,
we ever hear.
who says they don't know where
I'm gonna use the
parking
universal,
is?
everybody, when they
Well,
come
you
to
know
town
what?
says they don't know
Let's
where
have
parking is.
DPW create a couple of little parking
Yes,
signs
good.
that can be put up, and let's keep this clean,
It's the
legible,
state.
readable at 25 miles an hour, because that's the law.
Yes or no? Tell me.
Does anybody else, is there any?
I agree. I think, I never agreed that there should be any business names on there. It
Right.
just doesn't make any sense.
not
Businesses
paying
change,
anything
and
for
they're
it.
not all
Well,
on there. All the
it's a
points that he
liability.
made.
I mean, the
All the
parking is
points he
where we're at,
made.
right?
But,
No,
so
no.
I agree with the
Parking is
sign and
discussion.
the parking. I'd say we take the parking off.
You go down and look at that, what's the boat rental place? What's that
On
called?
the corner?
Yeah, they bought one post office square. There is a parking sign attached to the side of that building, angled back towards behind Shore TV and stuff.
At one point, in this whole odyssey, when we were talking about branding the town, it was to use this idea of what branding was, the logo, the fonts, the palettes, and all this stuff, and to use that and to create the kind of signs that you were talking about, Carrie, in town. There would be individual signs with parking with an arrow. It was almost put on hold until those were done, but we make sure that before, in that time, it was, well, Pete was around, not to make them until they knew what these signs were gonna look like, so they would look like they're all of a piece.
Individual
So,
parking.
and they would not be, I'm not talking about being on the sign, Carol.
No, I'm talking
I'm
now
talking about
about the
individual
Grove
signs.
Street sign because we have finished with Commerce Street. So now we're on to
Grove
Grove
Street.
Street,
All right, Grove
which
Street.
is essentially
Well, no, wait a minute.
identical
Is it with
to,
parking or without parking?
You
without.
need- Well,
Oh,
you
wait a
need
minute.
to make motion
I'm
on
voting
it.
for
Vote,
without.
It's a thing.
How many people say without?
You say without.
Without.
I'm without parking. That's enough.
Okay.
All right.
Without.
Okay, all right, parking.
Grove Street.
Now moving on to Grove Street. Grove Street, you've got 6 marinas on here.
One
and
at a
if-
time, please.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. What, Tom?
I said, I want them to park at the sports shop, not across the street.
There you go.
So we've already decided no businesses, just directional,
And no parking.
and no parking on that one.
What about?
So
what about
everything
that?
That
else,
makes
and then
Grove
you're-
Street look exactly the same,
Yeah.
which is
Your
good.
only other question is whether or not we can add the additional signs So with the cost.
No, wait a minute, wait.
What
Grove Street is
additional
okay, because it doesn't have parking.
No parking.
Wait,
No,
wait,
Grove Street-
what?
Grove Street
Grove
is
Street does
fine.
not have parking.
Right, so
But
it's
is it
fine.
okay?
It doesn't have parking, so it's
Right.
okay. No discussion. How about the one, exit 63?
Commerce, check.
Exit
Grove,
63.
check.
I'll make a motion to add exit 63 to the allotment of signs.
The only thing I would say, and I'm for it, but is certainly when you get off exit 63, a sign is there, but what about when you're leaving the mall? You know, when you're leaving
We
the
don't have,
mall.
we don't
yeah.
have property there.
That's where we have trouble right
don't
now
have property
directing
there.
people. People ask me all the time, when I go to the mall, business owners say, how do we get people from the mall downtown?
We
That's
don't have
where-
an easement to put a sign there. We have an easement to put a sign at that location.
That whole discussion is something that this last, never talked about, this thing. This is not the only way to solve this thing. What do we do about the malls? And if even it is private property, how do we find a way to move people around? So wayfinding is to move people around in the town, whether we talk to private people, private owners. The exit coming off southbound on 95, there's got to be something there. There's a lot of people now coming from Indian River.
You know
for that
what,
mall.
John, maybe that's a discussion for
It
another
is a
day.
separate discussion, but what Chris is saying is important.
It is
I don't-
important.
we
I
don't need
never,
it
I
now,
never thought of
but-
that before, but
So
yeah.
keep in mind, Clinton Crossing did participate in those conversations when we developed the signs. Remember when we did the whole marketing, Clinton Crossing was about, and the developer for Gil Morgan did participate in the conversations.
What do we got? So right now, let's just clarify. So we are good with, hang on, hang on. We're good with Commerce.
No parking.
No parking. We are good with Grove, as is, and then 63.
North High Street, 63.
And make sure you put the Morgan School. There'll be an
Oh,
outcry.
God.
There'll be an outcry. Am I right or am I wrong?
Right, it's not organized school.
The Morgan School.
That's how
All
I
right?
got into
How about just a Morgan School?
No!
A Morgan School?
I will have the words.
I told everybody I went to prep school.
That's not the same thing.
That's funny. All right, so we good with those?
Yeah.
So we have a motion to approve that? Do we have a motion to approve that?
Quick question. Is that 63 northbound? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
The town owns the property that the sign sits on. That's why it's there. You're also ignoring the signage that's currently there and was in one of these mock-ups that tells you how to line up with 81 North versus 81 South.
Yeah,
That's
but
not
But
gone.
this is eliminated because it's telling you to turn right.
And-
Wait, this is the one.
There's three
See,
lanes
it's telling you to turn right instead of.
Okay.
All right.
The thing is, those directional things. are
Wait a
what-
minute, we are talking
One at a
about
time.
this sign, correct?
But also, what lanes to get into, those signs are invisible. They're not functional. It says get in the right lane, there's 3 lanes there. They don't help.
Okay, good. All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a motion then to move forward?
And we are talking about approving the
Do we have
one
a
that
second? Hang on
says,
one second, we can talk. Let's just get a second so it's out on the table.
That
We
we
have a
can
second.
discuss.
I'll second.
Okay, good. Now, what else we got?
so we are talking about the one that will be facing people as they leave the turnpike, and it
Yes.
tells them to go to the right for Clinton Harbor, the right to the marinas.
Correct.
Perfect, love it,
Okay?
yep.
Any other further discussion?
I'd like to thank Rob Attenborough for allowing us to use that logo again and all the work he's done with the signage. He's done, I mean, this is a big project for somebody to do, and people get paid a lot of money to
And
do
it's
it.
fast.
And he was very fast doing it.
3 years.
Well, he had it designed 3 years ago. The only question I do have is just making sure the vector art is correct. There's a little funny thing with the letters, it might just be the printing, so
Yeah.
making sure when they do.
What was the art?
Is vector art?
What kind of art are we talking about?
The words, all of it's gonna be translated into vector when you submit it to the print read.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I got it.
Just making sure, because there's bubbles on all the very small text. So either.
I'm not submitting it, so.
Okay, that'd be Rob submitting, he'll know what to do.
All right.
May I just ask, one of the things in that area that we're talking about is particularly irritating to me for some reason, is that there are like 6 signs for 6 different things. It's like we litter with signs in this same area
Things
heading
that
to,
people put in themselves.
whether it's churches or whatnot.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Is there
People
any
doing
way,
advertising on their
since we
own?
have this, could we, or are we not allowed to touch signs that have been there for 25 years?
Those have separate approvals.
Okay,
The DOT blessed those.
they bless them.
And they're giving us a hard time over removing signs that are irrelevant. So if you see the signage that directs people to Unilever and the loading dock at Unilever, there's a reluctance to let us take those down, even though that's not a thing.
Okay. That's a shame. Hopefully our focus will be on this beautiful sign.
These look,
Yeah, they're great.
these are
Anybody else?
beautiful.
It's a great.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. Get out, John, get out of here.
Go.
Take your paper and leave. Take your paper and leave. All right, we're going to move on now to item number 11, which is the Elliott parking lot line item transfer. Request from Carl to, what are we doing here? $1,250 to increase for miscellaneous, and we're taking the money out of the annual town report of $1,250. Any questions on this transfer? Motion to approve?
So moved.
A second? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right, next one is land use. Land use AC unit replacement for $12,000, and this will be coming from the chipper fund and for $6,000 and the lift for $6,000. Any questions? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. Capital transfer for the police department. So this is relocation of funds for new police capital projects for patrol vehicles. New amount of $44,921.29, and this will be coming out of police fleet vehicle for $9,921.29, and for body slash car cameras, $35,000. Questions?
How many cars is it?
Do you
Just
want
This
questions before?
This replaces a detective vehicle that went out of service in December of 2021.
So this is one vehicle?
It's moving idle monies into the account for patrol vehicles to buy a replacement for the vehicle that went out of service at the end of the year last year.
Are we, and I didn't hear which vehicle, are we moving away from the leased vehicles? Is that why the purchase?
Yes, that's been the policy in the budget for 2 years now of purchasing vehicles instead of leasing.
What about the body cameras? Are they not necessary?
Body cameras had an excess balance because we received a grant from the state for installing them, so there was a surplus left over in that account because we did receive a nominal grant that reduced the cost. We budgeted the whole cost of the project when we originally put the budget together.
Okay. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. And the last transfer is for information technology for $2,100 for the Park and Rec for an iRock camera. And it'll be coming from Park and Rec software of $2,100. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. Item number 15 is the Finance Director's report. So Sue.
Hi, everybody. Tonight is review of April, which is the 10th month of fiscal year '22, first month of the final quarter. I just want to apologize for the formatting of the reports in your package. I noticed that once they were scanned to you, they lost some of the formatting. If you want a cleaner copy, let me know and I can get one to you. It's kind of hard to read where the totals are unless you see them in the reports that you have. Revenues for the month of April, revenues in total were $2.9 million. 2.6 of that was the final ECS grant monies that we received from the state. The remaining amounts were made up of $200,000 of tax revenues, $90,000 in town services, and $25,000 of other revenues. Those are further detailed in my report. Year-to-date, the revenues are $56.8 million, which is 97% of the total year budget, comparable to where we were at the same time last year. Current tax levy is 99.5% compared to 99.4% last year. Excuse me. Tax revenues for the 10 months ending April in total are $520,000 over the full year budget, and town service revenues are $235,000 as well over the full year budget amounts. I mention that because we just found out recently that we will have shortfalls. The ECS revenue was $22,000 less than what we anticipated, and the special education grant fund monies that we expected to receive will be $100,000 less. So those two shortfalls will be covered by the additional revenues that we'll be receiving in the town services and the taxes. I explained that in the report as well. Expenses for the month of April were $3.9 million. 2.8 of that, the majority of that was the education, payroll, and operating expenditures. 761 was for payroll and fringe benefits, runs right along with the prior months. And the 300,000 is remaining is the usual recurring expenses, further explained in the report as well. Year-to-date, the expenses were $46.5 million, 80% of the total year budget. Again, comparable to where we usually are this time of year. Any of the expenses on the town side that are anticipated to be over budget at the end of the year, which we spoke about last month, I expect to be covered by unused contingency, unused encumbrances, and overages available in other departments. For example, we talked about communications that I mentioned, DPW, and general government. In addition to that, I did a forecast on salaries for the full year. Once the salaries are posted, the final salary for 22 will be the first week of July. Once they're posted, I do anticipate there to be overages in the full-time salary line because we had a significant amount of retirements as well as resignations in the town hall this year, and we had to do the payouts of the accrued time. That totaled about $45,000. I do expect those overages, though, to be covered by unfilled staff positions that we had during the year. We had some part-time positions as well as some full-time positions. So I think in the end, those will balance out just fine. The investment balances were $29.9 million. $27 million of that is unrestricted. And you'll also notice in your report for fund balance, the fund balance calculation has been updated for the passing of the fiscal year 23 budget at the referendum. It now includes the calculation for the 1.6 of the capital projects that were appropriated and the $250,000 of the fund balance that was applied. So the unassigned fund balance is now 22.5%, and the 4.4 million, which was previously 6.5 million. And it's now based on fiscal year 23 expenditures, where previously it was based on fiscal year 22. So I just wanted to point that out to you. That calculation as well is in the packet. Contingency now is 113. That was reduced by the $30,000 bucket truck expenditures that you approved at the last month's meeting as well. Just some things, other things in the finance department. It's very helpful to us as well when the budget passes the first time. It allows us to begin prepping budgets and the financials for 23. It also allows departments to start inputting their purchase recs in for 23, so it just gives us a lot more time, so we're not so rushed. Our new AP person has been hired. She's moving along very quickly, getting up to speed, very comfortable. I think that was a good hire. I sent out this week to the department heads asking them to review their unused capital expenditures that they will have at the end of 22, because as per town policy, any unused expenditures, appropriations can only be carried forward for 2 years. So that means that anything that's appropriated in fiscal year 22 that's not used will automatically be carried over to 23. Anything else needs your approval to be moved forward. So I gave them their list of anything and asked them to come up with reasonings for their carry forwards, and I hope to have that to you at your June meeting. ARPA update. I noted some of the ones in the report. In addition to that, in May, we've also written checks for $193,100 under the nonprofit assistance authorized ARPA project expenditure category to 9 different nonprofit organizations. So,
Thank you, Sue.
Any
Anybody have any
questions?
questions?
Sue, is there any idea what the fuel, I mean, I just, man, I was looking at the DPW fuel line item. They're already, as at the end of, that was the end of April, right? They were $20,000 over, they have a $20,000 overage. I can't imagine what the next 2 months are gonna be.
yeah, and the only thing I don't know about that is I don't know if we're expecting any reimbursements from like the Board of Ed, because they do reimburse us for their usage. I don't know where we are in the timing with those.
Okay, this is I don't know, this may be a stupid question, but that $115,000, is that a specific number of gallons purchased for the town, or is that just a dollar amount to buy the gallons that are needed?
I'm sorry, I don't
Well,
know.
I mean,
15,000.
never mind, I'll ask you another time. Never mind.
Any other questions that I can
Well,
answer?
no, like I budget my oil payments. You know, I say I want to save 600. I want to save 600 gallons a year for me, and I pay for that.
Future contract.
Yeah, in a contract. So my guess is that this is just dollars waiting to pay bills. So you really don't know what you're going to get for bills.
It's dollars to pay bills.
Yeah.
The gallons are based on an average of use, because obviously in a heavy snow response year, you might spend more on gas than you would normally.
And that contract is up for bid right now, or
Correct.
renewal.
Correct.
We're looking, RFPs, right? It's gonna be interesting.
Okay, anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Item number 16, council discussion on future projects and/or correspondences. Does anyone have anything?
I'm very happy that ARPA money's going out. That's really exciting. Thank you for that.
Anybody else?
The last I heard about the beautification committee was an email from Bruce Leidy saying that that's what happens when you form a committee, you get 17 different opinions. So I think the thoughts for having something in place by Memorial Day are on the shelf, and hopefully there'll be something in place this summer sometime, but
They had to order more expensive pots that wouldn't be taken away. People became really concerned with theft. And though they're heavy, they're not impossibly to move. So they went for a $500 pot. And not 26 of them either.
The
No,
pots that
the original ones are $1,700.
Yeah, the
That's how
Arbor
much
Garden
those are.
pots are $1,700 a piece.
Yeah.
So we could buy one and put a geranium in it.
At least you save on water.
Yeah.
Solves that watering problem. Yeah, so I think, I don't know what we'll see from them this year, but it's not going to be the project that we originally anticipated.
They're adding on to the garden project, which is good. They work together.
What about those projects for the facade, the awnings? Have any of that, has any of the bids moved forward?
John Allen is dealing with one of those individuals. I have no update from him. My guess is that it hasn't moved anywhere. He's been given a number of entities. Public Works is now helping him find contractors. So I don't know where that one is. There was another entity that came forward. State Historic Preservation Office had to come into town because it's a historic property. A lot of the area is designated as historic, so they're going to have to weigh in on these scopes of work too. So there's a little bit of disappointment in the extent to which SHPO wanted the window treatments to be done, so that individual is thinking through another approach now.
Anyone else?
I'm hoping that perhaps focus can be put on the town beach. Okay, I'll just stop there. Okay.
Anybody else? All right, we will move on to Chairman's report. I have nothing to report tonight. We'll move on to the town manager's report.
So you have my written report. Included in that was a discussion of a meeting with Frontier to talk about their planned improvements to internet service in Clinton by upgrading to fiber optic, which is the new standard. So here are some of the slide deck that they provided for your own edification. So this is something that will be ongoing this summer, where they will be laying fiber optic on top of the existing copper wire that they have for the old SNET phone service, and what is the current backbone that provides your cable if you use them for cable, and internet if you use them for internet. So the build out this year would service 5,800 single-family homes or single businesses. Anything that's larger, like an apartment building or something like that, requires different engineering for them, and they have to have a different dialogue with the property owner to access the guts of the building. So the majority of the customers in Clinton will have access to fiber optic broadband through this program. If you know what these mean, it's 50 megabytes or 2 gigabit service in parallel up download and upload, which is reported to be a good service standard. If you're into that, there's a slide there on what it means as impacts to the community. It is something to call attention to the town, as not every community is getting fiber optic at present, so that's a help to residents, it's a help to businesses that they have that access. It's a slide that kind of shows you how the fiber finds its way from their central office out into individual neighborhoods. There will be neighborhood hubs. So this would be a cabinet that's attached to phone poles. The current refrigerator-sized cabinets, which carries the current level of service, those could be phased out if a lot of people migrate over to the fiber service. But right now, they're in the mode of running things in parallel. There is a picture of what the box looks like. So you can see it's a smaller box than the refrigerator-sized boxes that went on earlier, so it's about the width of the pole rather than the size of a refrigerator. In certain instances where the sidewalk is small, the installation can be done above walking height. The aerial splice shows you what it looks like up in the air. And so they've given us their contacts for Frontier people. They've given us contacts for the actual company that will be doing the installation work, so that there's a good back and forth when they're in town, that we're coordinating public safety, traffic control, and the like while they're working. So I've seen this go up in another community. It is a fair amount of work in the street. So there'll be, I guess, for Sue, the potential for an awful lot of police private duty revenue to come in. So that's another help to the budget.
It's a good deal.
The
Any price break on the fee?
no price break on the fee. I guess people will get a mailer that will tell them of the potential of what this can cost, and theoretically there's a savings there, but I guess that's sort of a function of what you're currently buying off of Frontier if you're a Frontier customer, whether it's phone, cable, or internet. This is more of a pivot to being an internet service provider than a phone service provider. As follow-up to a prior meeting, there was a discussion on creating a committee for looking at noise ordinance. That Carrie and Carol had volunteered. A third member is yet to be identified. I did reach out to the police department and police commission. They're going to be providing someone from the commission, and of course the police department will be interested in participating. Then now that the goals have been ratified by the council, I did put together a sheet as more of a project tracking in line with what we had talked about and some of the stuff on the immediate horizon and other feedback that I've gotten that starts to fill it out. So it lists the name of the goal, and then there's some activities underneath it with the who, who's responsible for it, the what, there's a brief description of it, notes if any, and then the when. I populated it with when there would be business that has to be done by the council so that you can track it for when you need to know when you're going to be involved. So under the goal 1, which is more financial, the meeting dates are the budget meetings, which is February, March, and April. Financial planning, that's typically taking place in October. And then looking at 5-year capital, that would be something that could take place in a separate workshop. It's discussed at financial forecasting, and then any future budget actions impact that. Continue using technology to improve efficiency, and then monitor and collect data on how departments are performing. That's all stuff that would be led by the manager and could lead to a council workshop where performance measures are presented to the council so you can get a better feel for how departments operate. Enhancing quality of life. So there's a town council beautification project there on developing a plan and priorities for general beautification. The action step that needs to be done is defining project scope and budget. Beautification, by their charge, owes the council a report by November 30th for what they want to do in the upcoming year. The budget is obviously the implementation tool. I'm sure there's a lot more granularity that could be in there for specific individual locations, but I try to leave it high level at this point for laying out the strategy. The state budget included an allocation of state ARPA funds to provide $55,000 to improve the town beach. So that becomes a Park and Rec Commission driven process. The nexus back to the council would ultimately be a meeting to accept the grant and authorize the signing of a grant agreement, which is the usual course of business for the state of Connecticut. So I'm assuming they'll follow their same grant-making mechanism, even though it's ARPA funding.
What kind of time frame do you think that would be?
Those dollars are, they were passed as part of the budget bill. Budget bill is legal and then says 7/1 for the fiscal year. So those dollars I would not anticipate, they're not legally authorized to be released until the start of the fiscal year. When it's mechanically released is an entirely different matter. So somebody at the state would have to release a grant agreement telling us what the rules of the road are for the funding. Grant agreement has to be signed, and then get into a process for drawdowns to pull the money in.
So it would be at best at the end of the season, maybe hold it off until the next year after the winter.
I had a conversation with Bo about it today, for what the plan would be and thought process, procurement and things like that. So I did advise him if there are other procurement tools to do construction projects that don't involve the process that he's traditionally gone through. It's part of the benefit of piggybacking bid that we are now a member of the Capital Region Council of Governments for purchasing purposes. Todd used it over at Public Works to quickly do some work there. It worked well for us. It's a procurement process that I've used with other state agencies, but you've got to be comfortable with it, and it gives you the opportunity to move faster. So it's just a matter of getting those dollars down here and somebody telling me what the rules of the road are for them. Economic development that enhances the community includes the stated discussion relative to the council studying uses and costs of Pearson. So that would be at a workshop to be determined. Looking for the EDC to develop an economic development strategy to put some focus on what they're doing. So the council would be a stakeholder, so I would imagine there would be some engagement, assuming the EDC takes this on as a real project, and then there would be a report back to the council on strategy. The next step would also be hiring the economic development coordinator to do business outreach and provide information that feeds the EDC's discussion, and then theoretically something could come to the council in terms of what that report is, or if there's a business-specific action that involves council activity. Inform and engage the community and its stakeholders. So this was continue to work with the Morgan School to offer the budget preference survey to get some public engagement. So that would line up for a council meeting at the beginning of the budget process. creating additional content, reports, and the like that may address topics of public interest, put it on Facebook, put it on the website to have more content than what's already out there. Promoting a town organization that's sustainable and maintains employee morale. So with the passage of the budget, this now becomes recruiting a qualified professional town planner to be an employee. Council actions would be approving a job description before we go out on the street, and then once we have the hire, council action to ratify the employment of the individual. So that's an initial stab at trying to put together actions that reinforce the goals of the council and then give you milestones for when you might want to talk about it.
I, for one, can't tell you how much I appreciate this. And what I'd really, in further meetings, try to understand, now obviously these are a lot, but how we piecemeal and parcel them out and discuss them and keep up with them at each meeting. I guess that's, I mean, this is a lot. But figure out how we can address these things and not just, this is great.
Yeah, some
Just to
of
move
it
on.
have regular rhythms of when it would take place. So anything that's budget related, obviously the focus comes in play for the budget process, which is February through April.
Right.
Things can be worked in, or council can identify priorities during the financial forecasting exercise. That's what took place last October with sort of an overwhelming consensus to say we want to go to a town planner, try and work it into the budget. Then I used that to help me craft the budget that you ultimately got in February. So you've got baked in discussion points for anything that has sort of a financial connection for where if dollars are going to be needed. We're building into our assumptions, or kind of understand what the impact is going to be one way or the other.
May I ask if it's possible, and maybe it's not always possible, each 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, that for, instead of future projects on the agenda, that we put something here onto it, rather, because these are our future projects. These are a lot of projects. So perhaps, could we put
Town council
address
goals?
beautification, blah, blah, or, you know, take one of these and discuss it, or one or two of them. Instead of just future projects, this is a whole bunch of them. Do you know what I'm saying?
So discussion of future town
Or
council
discussion
goals, I guess,
of
and-
the implementation of the 55,000, or whatever's current, whatever's,
I guess
just
we
a
could-
thought, because
right.
that's sort of hard, you have to think about it, and,
That part would be
and a
picking that
timely
one, yeah.
I'm sorry?
I said the difficult would be which one you would be picking at any given meeting. So putting on a discussion on a town council goals kind of blog that we have here. So if it is this, and then when we have the discussion amongst the council members, identify it while we're at the meeting.
That's the tricky part, because it is, you know, some of them are timely and some of them
Right.
aren't, but if we could choose them and just keep up with them, that would be great.
All right, let's see how to play that out.
I know that's hard, but,
All right, we'll see if there's a way.
because we don't have to come up with future projects anymore, here they are.
Yeah, no. All right, we can work on that as well.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Anything else?
I'm done.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right, nothing else, and we'll go to 19. This is a long agenda. When you go to page 2, we got a problem. All right, Town Council Committee Liaison Reports. Does anybody have anything to report?
EDC didn't have enough people to have a meeting. So.
Excellent. Anybody else?
Very short PNC.
Excellent.
We had a natural hazards mitigation plan, and we went over the 18 points that we're focusing on. A lot of them are sort of in status quo at the moment. Everything from creating the design standards, your flood zones, sea level rise, infrastructure improvements. We inventory the generators and essential facilities, business recovery plan, retrofit and expand and construct a new fire station, local social resources, possible open space criteria, updating recovery and reconstruction plans, evacuation routes, repetitive loss and repetitive lost properties that exist, road reconstruction, updating the culverts, elevating roads and bridges, talk about dune restoration, circulating the existing literature that we already have, and then preparedness and recovery website for the town. And talk about prioritizing some of these. Some of these really are, like I said, it's status quo at the moment. Some of them are relative to funding opportunities, both through the state, nonprofit partnerships, etc. So that's where we are at this point. We're just going to keep plugging along and working with the RiverCog on it. And there's also Circa, who is the consultant that's been allocated to the project.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we are on to number 20.
20.
Okay, so we need a motion to go into executive session and invite Carl and Mary.
So moved.
Second. I got it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. Nader. We have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. Thank you, Carl, for that. And a motion to adjourn.
So.
Second? Discussion? All in favor? Well, good? Okay. Thank you, everyone.